The void between stars held secrets that Captain Sarah Chen never expected to find. The UES Pathfinder drifted at the edge of mapped space, its sensors probing the darkness while its crew conducted their standard survey mission. 20 years of deep space exploration had taught Chen to trust her instincts, and something about this sector felt different. "Captain, we're picking up unusual radiation patterns from the Epsilon cluster," Lieutenant Rivera reported from his science station. "The signatures don't match anything in our database." Chen studied the holographic display floating above her command chair. The energy readings pulsed with an almost organic rhythm, like the heartbeat of something vast and ancient. "Launch a probe. Let's get a closer look." The probe's data started streaming in within minutes, painting a picture that made Chen's blood run cold. An entire civilization's worth of ships huddled around a dying star, their designs unlike anything humanity had encountered. But it wasn't their alien architecture that concerned her. It was their desperate formation, clustered together like animals sensing an approaching predator. "Life signs?" Chen asked, already knowing the answer would complicate everything. "Millions, Captain. The ships appear to be refugee vessels, packed well beyond safe capacity." And Rivera paused, double-checking his readings. "The star they're orbiting is showing signs of imminent collapse. Based on these readings, they have less than 2 weeks before it goes supernova." Chen remembered her xenobiology training. Most spacefaring species evolved on gentle worlds, developing technology to compensate for their physical limitations. But humans had emerged from Earth, a death world by galactic standards, where every step of evolution had been forged in the crucible of survival. Their bodies could endure radiation levels that would kill most aliens. Their bones were dense enough to withstand crushing gravitational forces, and their technology was built to match. "Open a channel," Chen ordered, knowing this decision would change everything. "All frequencies, first contact protocols." The response came in a burst of mathematical sequences, universal language. Within moments, their computers had established a basic translation matrix. The alien voice that came through carried equal measures of fear and desperation. "Unknown vessel, we are the luminary. Please maintain your distance. Our sensors detect your ship's military capabilities. We cannot risk conflict in our current crisis." Chen leaned forward in her chair. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Pathfinder. We've detected your star's instability. We're here to offer assistance." A pause followed, heavy with uncertainty. "Your offer is unexpected, but our internal sensors confirm what our scientists already knew. The radiation levels will be lethal within days. No ship can survive close enough to evacuate our people." A slight smile crossed Chen's face. "No ordinary ship, perhaps. But we're human. What you call lethal, we call Tuesday." She nodded to her tactical officer. "Show them." The Pathfinder's shields reconfigured, extending a protective bubble that cut through the stellar radiation like a knife through fog. Environmental readings in the shielded zone dropped to safe levels for even the most sensitive species. "This is a demonstration of what we can do," Chen continued. "The Pathfinder can clear safe corridors for evacuation ships. We've already sent a distress call to the nearest human fleet. More ships like ours will arrive within days." Another pause, shorter this time. "You would help us, despite never meeting our kind before." "That's what humans do," Chen replied. "We survived a world that tried to kill us every day, developed technology to protect ourselves from forces that should have destroyed us. Now we use those same tools to help others survive." The luminary ships began to move, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as they verified the Pathfinder's shield effectiveness. Chen watched as the first refugee vessel entered their protective corridor, its sensors confirming what their words had promised. "Launch the emergency beacons," she ordered. "Plot a series of hyperspace corridors to the nearest safe systems, and get me a direct line to Fleet Command. Tell them." She paused, looking at the massive evacuation ahead of them. "Tell them humanity just found its next impossible challenge." As the Pathfinder's crew sprang into action, Chen reflected on the irony. Humans had spent centuries being feared as death-world savages, their very existence making other species uncomfortable. But sometimes, she thought, it took people forged in fire to guide others through the flames. Admiral Victor Reyes stood at the viewport of the UES Hyperion, watching as the human rescue fleet assembled around the Pathfinder. 12 ships, each one built to withstand conditions that would tear most vessels apart. Their hulls were scarred from countless battles with the harsh realities of space, wearing their survival like badges of honor. The luminary representatives aboard his ship couldn't hide their unease. Their crystalline forms shimmered with anxiety patterns every time a human crew member passed by. To them, everything about humans screamed predator, from their forward-facing eyes to their sturdy builds designed to survive Earth's crushing gravity. "Your bodies," Speaker Lyra of the Luminary said, her translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of her native speech. "They contain metals, dense minerals. You breathe corrosive gases. Even your blood is toxic to most life forms." Reyes nodded, remembering his stenobiology briefings. The Luminary had evolved on a world of gentle breezes and soft light, their bodies more energy than matter. "Evolution shaped us differently," he explained. "Earth forced us to become strong or die. Every step of our development was a fight for survival. And yet you used this strength not for conquest, but for rescue." The patterns flowing through Lyra's crystalline form shifted to something approximating curiosity. Before Reyes could respond, alarms blared across the fleet. "Admiral," his science officer called out, "the star's deterioration is accelerating. New estimate gives us 72 hours at most." The luminary delegation's fear patterns returned stronger than ever. Their original estimates had given them nearly 2 weeks. Now they had 3 days to evacuate millions. "Show me the numbers," Reyes demanded, moving to the tactical display. The holographic projection filled the bridge with a dance of terrible statistics. Radiation levels were climbing exponentially. Temperature spikes would soon make conventional approach vectors impossible. "We can't get all our people out in time." Lyra's harmonics had shifted to pure despair. "Not even with your ship's help. The physics are impossible." Reyes smiled grimly. "Impossible is what humans do best." He opened a channel to the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Reyes. You've all seen the data. What we're about to attempt goes against every safety protocol in the book. But there are millions of lives at stake, and we didn't evolve on a death world just to let physics tell us no." He turned to his bridge crew. "Engineering, I want our shields modified to channel radiation instead of just blocking it. Navigation, plot courses that use the star's magnetic fields to boost our speed. We're going to turn this killer into a tool." "Sir," his first officer protested, "those modifications could cook us even through our radiation shielding." "Then we'll cook," Reyes replied. "Our bodies can handle radiation levels that would kill most species instantly. We've got medics standing by with anti-rad treatments. This is what we trained for." The Luminary watched in stunned silence as the human fleet began to transform. Ships that were already engineering marvels were being pushed beyond their design limits. Crews that should have been terrified were instead focused and determined, their death world heritage preparing them for exactly this kind of impossible situation. "Your people," Lyra observed, her patterns shifting to something new, respect tinged with awe. "They're not afraid." "Oh, we're afraid," Reyes corrected her. "Fear kept our ancestors alive on Earth. But humans learned long ago that fear is just another tool. We use it to sharpen our focus, fuel our determination." The first modified ship moved into position, its shields glowing with captured radiation. Instead of fighting the star's fury, they were harnessing it, creating corridors of relative calm through which the luminary ships could pass. It was dangerous, experimental, and exactly the kind of adaptation that had allowed humanity to survive on their hostile homeworld. "This is why the galaxy fears us," Reyes said softly, watching his fleet work. "Not because we're monsters, but because we've learned to make friends with the monsters. We took everything that should have killed us and turned it into strength. Around them, the rescue operation began to accelerate. Human ships danced through radiation storms that would have vaporized most vessels, their crews enduring conditions that defied conventional survival metrics. They were rewriting the rules of what was possible, just as their ancestors had done countless times on Earth. The luminaries' fear patterns had completely vanished now, replaced by something closer to wonder. They were witnessing firsthand why humans had earned their reputation as Death Worlders, and why that very reputation might be the key to their salvation. The bridge of the UES Hyperion had become a symphony of organized chaos. Chief Engineer Maya Santos wiped sweat from her brow as she made another adjustment to the radiation shielding. Her hands were steady despite the tremors running through the ship, despite the warning lights flashing across every console. Shield integrity at 30%, the computer announced. Radiation levels exceeding safe parameters. Santos laughed darkly. Safe parameters were written by people who never had to evacuate millions from a dying star. She keyed her comm. Bridge, engineering. We can give you another 20 minutes at these levels before we need to rotate out. On the main viewer, streams of luminary vessels flowed through the corridors created by the human fleet. Each human ship had become a lighthouse in a storm, their modified shields creating paths through the stellar hell that surrounded them. The cost was brutal. Every vessel's hull was beginning to warp from the strain, and crew members were rotating through medical bays for radiation exposure treatments. Incoming priority signal from the Pathfinder. Communications announced. Captain Chen's face appeared on screen, her skin showing the reddish burns of radiation exposure despite the protective measures. Admiral, we've got a problem. The star's core is becoming unstable faster than predicted. We're detecting microflares that could cut through our shield corridors. Rai studied the tactical display, where red warning indicators were spreading like a disease. They'd evacuated nearly 2 million luminary, but there were still over 4 million to go. At their current rate, they'd never make it in time. What if we didn't fight it? Lieutenant Rivera spoke up from his science station. All eyes turned to him. The flares followed predictable patterns. Instead of trying to block them, we could. He paused, knowing how crazy it would sound. Surf them. Surf a stellar flare. Santos' voice carried equal parts disbelief and intrigue. The energy transfer alone would tear most ships apart. Most ships, Rise echoed, a plan forming. But our ships were built to survive atmospheric re-entry, asteroid impacts, and close orbits around black holes. We're already pushing them beyond their limits. Why not go all the way? The next hour was a blur of calculations and modifications. Every engineer in the fleet worked to reconfigure their ship shields, turning them into solar sails designed to ride the stellar winds rather than fight them. It was the kind of insane adaptation that had kept humanity alive on Earth, turning a deadly force into a tool for survival. All ships, execute Operation Surfboard on my mark, Rice commanded. Around the fleet, crew members strapped in and prepared for what would either be their finest hour or their last. 3, 2, 1, mark. The human ships stopped fighting the star's fury. Instead, they angled their shields to catch the plasma eruptions, using the enormous energy to accelerate their movements. The maneuver subjected their hulls to forces that would have shattered any normal vessel, but these ships had been built by a species that treated the impossible as a challenge. Through it all, the Luminary watched in amazement. Their own ships, delicate and precise, could never have attempted such madness. But here were the humans, the feared Death Worlders, literally riding the death throes of a star to save people they'd just met. Admiral, Santos called out, her voice strained but triumphant. The new approach is working. We've increased evacuation efficiency by 300%. The next 48 hours became a testament to human endurance. Crew members worked until they collapsed, then got up and worked more. Medical bays were filled with radiation burns and stress injuries, but no one complained. They'd found their rhythm in the chaos, dancing with forces that should have destroyed them. When the star finally began its terminal phase, The last luminary vessel was already clear of the danger zone. The human fleet, battered but unbowed, formed up around their rescued charges. Their ships bore scars that would never fully heal. Their crews would need months to recover, but they had done it. Speaker Lyra's form pulsed with emotions too complex for her translator to convey. "You risked everything," she finally managed. "Your ships, your lives, your very bodies. All for a species you had never met before." "That's what makes us human," Rise replied, watching the star begin its final collapse. "We know what it's like to face extinction, to survive against impossible odds. Earth taught us that lesson every day of our evolution. Now we use that strength to ensure no one else has to learn it the hard way." Dr. Elena Kovic stared at her medical bay's readouts with growing horror. Throughout the UES Hyperion, similar scenes were playing out in every ship of the human fleet. The radiation exposure levels were far beyond anything their bodies were designed to handle, even with their Death World adaptations. "Admiral," she reported, her voice tight with professional concern, "we're losing crew faster than we can treat them. The radiation is overwhelming our cellular regeneration capabilities. Even with anti-rad treatments, we're approaching lethal exposure levels." On the bridge, Admiral Rice received this news with the same grim determination that had characterized the entire rescue operation. The tactical display told an equally dire story. Hull integrity across the fleet was failing. Shields were buckling, and the star's death throes were becoming increasingly violent. "How many luminari remain?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. 800,000, his tactical officer replied. "At current evacuation rates, we need another 6 hours to get them all out." "But sir," he hesitated, "the fleet won't hold together that long. We're literally falling apart." The luminary delegation aboard the Hyperion watched this exchange with growing distress. Their crystalline forms flickered with patterns of guilt and despair. Speaker Lyra stepped forward, her translator struggling to convey the complexity of her emotions. "Admiral, you must withdraw your fleet. We cannot ask your people to die for us. The remaining luminary, we will accept our fate." The silence that followed her words was broken by a harsh laugh from engineering. Chief Santos's voice came over the comm, interrupted by coughing. "With all due respect, Speaker, that's not how humans operate. We didn't come this far to leave anyone behind." But even as she spoke, warning klaxons blared across the fleet. The star was entering its final phase, sending out waves of energy that made previous emissions look mild by comparison. The human ships shuddered under the onslaught, their modified shields struggling to maintain the evacuation corridors. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Someone shouted. "Emergency containment failing. Radiation levels in engineering approaching critical. Shield generators overheating on all vessels." The cascade of crisis reports was interrupted by Captain Chen's voice from the Pathfinder. "Admiral, I have a proposal. It's not exactly by the book." "At this point, Captain, the book's been pretty thoroughly rewritten," Rise replied. "What's your idea?" "We convert our ship's matter/antimatter cores to create a temporary artificial singularity," Chen said. "Use it to bend spacetime around the remaining luminary vessels. A gravitational slingshot effect, combined with our shield corridors, could get them all out in one massive burst." The science officer's jaw dropped. "Captain, that's insane. The power requirements alone would drain our cores completely," Chen finished. "We'd be stranded here, but the luminary would be safe." Rise looked around his bridge. Every human crew member present knew what this meant. Without their main power cores, the fleet would be unable to escape the star's final explosion. It was the ultimate expression of what made humans different. The willingness to sacrifice everything to save others. "Engineering," he called out. "Can we do it?" Santos' reply was immediate, despite the obvious pain in her voice. "Give me 30 minutes to modify the containment fields. We'll make it work." "Admiral," Lyra interrupted, her form pulsing with intense emotion. "You cannot do this. Your species is too valuable to lose. Your strength, your courage, your impossible ability to survive. The galaxy needs humans. Reyes smiled softly. Speaker Lyra, everything that makes us valuable, our strength, our determination, our ability to survive against all odds, comes from one simple truth. We never leave people behind. Not on Earth, not in space, not ever. If we abandoned you now, we'd lose the very thing that makes us human. He opened a channel to the fleet. All hands, this is the Admiral. You know the situation. You know what we're about to attempt. I won't order anyone to stay. Escape pods are authorized for any crew member who wishes to withdraw. The response was unanimous. Not a single escape pod launched. In every ship of the fleet, human crews strapped in, checked their systems, and prepared to give everything they had to save a species they barely knew. Very well, Rice said, pride evident in his voice. All ships begin core conversion sequence. Let's show the galaxy what Death Worlders can really do. Time seemed to slow as the human fleet executed their desperate plan. The synchronized conversion of 12 matter/antimatter cores created a cascade of gravitational distortions that bent the fabric of space itself. Inside the Hyperion's engineering section, Chief Santos worked through her radiation sickness, her fingers dancing across controls as she coordinated the power transfer. Artificial singularity forming, the science officer reported, his voice filled with awe. Gravitational lensing effect exceeding predictions. The remaining luminary ships, nearly 800,000 souls aboard them, found themselves caught in an impossible physics equation. The human fleet's sacrifice was creating a path through space-time itself, a corridor that would carry them to safety in one massive burst. Energy buildup reaching critical levels, Santos warned. Core containment fields starting to fail. Admiral Rice stood at his command station, watching as the culmination of human ingenuity and determination unfolded around him. Speaker Lyra, you need to go. Your last transport is waiting. The luminary leader's crystalline form pulsed with a complexity of emotions that her translator couldn't begin to process. The galaxy will know of this, she promised. Everyone will know what humans truly are. Then tell them this, Rice said, his voice firm despite the ship shuddering around him. Tell them that strength without compassion is meaningless. Tell them that the same traits that make us dangerous are the ones that let us save lives. Tell them that being a Death Worlder taught us not just how to survive, but why survival matters. The final luminary transport departed, carrying Speaker Lyra and the last of her people. As it entered the gravitational corridor, the human fleet's power cores reached their breaking point. Warning systems screamed as containment fields began to collapse. All luminary vessels clear, Chen reported from the Pathfinder. Gravitational corridor is stable. They'll reach safe space in 3 minutes. Those 3 minutes stretched into eternity as the human ships held their position, their crews fighting to maintain the corridor despite their failing systems. The Star's final death throes battered against their shields, radiation alarms blared in every compartment, and still they held. Just as the last luminary ship reached safety, something unexpected happened. A massive vessel emerged from hyperspace, its design unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was followed by another and another, an armada of ships representing species from across the galaxy. This is High Commander Xar of the Combined Fleet, a new voice announced on all frequencies. Human vessels, hold position. Emergency recovery operation commencing. Rice stared in disbelief as tractor beams locked onto his dying ships. The Combined Fleet, a theoretical emergency response force that had never been successfully assembled in galactic history, had actually come. More ships continued to arrive, each representing a different species that had once feared humanity's death world nature. Did you think, Commander Xar continued, that we would let the saviors of the luminary face extinction alone? That we would allow the galaxy to lose those who proved that evolution on a death world could produce not just survivors, but heroes? As the human fleet was towed to safety, their crews finally allowing themselves to rest. Admiral Reyes received one final transmission. It was from Speaker Lyra, now safely aboard a refugee vessel. "You were wrong before, Admiral," she said, "when you said that being a Death Worlder taught you why survival matters. What you taught us, what humanity showed the galaxy today, is that survival isn't about being the strongest or the most adaptable. It's about being willing to use that strength to ensure everyone survives together." In the months that followed, the story of the human fleet's sacrifice spread across the galaxy. The fear of Death Worlders began to fade, replaced by a new understanding. Humanity's harsh evolution hadn't created monsters. It had forged guardians. Their ships still carried enough weapons to level cities. Their bodies could still survive conditions that would kill most species, but now everyone understood why. Because sometimes saving lives required the kind of strength that only a Death World could teach, and humanity had proven they would use that strength not for conquest or dominion, but to ensure that no species ever had to face extinction alone. The Luminary established their new homes across dozens of worlds, their culture forever changed by their encounter with humanity. In their great halls, they erected monuments not to human strength or resilience, but to human compassion. Their children learned that the most important lesson Earth's Death World had taught its inhabitants wasn't how to survive, but how to help others survive.